help them find something new when they saw the Denver Botanic Gardens. So we went through a branding initiative. Now, I don't know how many of you have been in corporations or businesses and have tried to go through rebranding. I've been through it many times, sometimes through wild success, other times through great difficulty. There's a good way to do it and a bad way to do it. What we did is open up the process and involve people at every level with their attachment to the gardens and found out what they saw and what they sought within our institution. And after many months, we went from huge resistance to rebranding to people that promoted and loved our brand of 30 years, actually making the motion and carrying forward the new brand for the next 30 years. And even though we have a new icon, we have a new color scheme, we have new kinds of graphics, which, by the way, just won 2 statewide awards for our annual report and our newsletter, which is very exciting. But we also did the most important work, and that is look at our core values so that we can test all programs, buildings, approaches against these core values. They are sustainability, pretty obvious for gardens. We're about life sustaining itself over time, taking the lessons that we learned from the natural world and translating it to a broad audience and a broad spectrum. Sustainability means sustainability for our institution, making sure we don't again build something and stop maintaining it. We have an incredible historic building right there, the Venture Conservatory. And for about 30 years, it wasn't maintained like it needed to be maintained. And I'm happy to tell you that in the last year or so, we have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in reestablishing its heating system, its ventilation system, its venting system. And now, as opposed to years past when you go on a day when it was in the 80s or 90s and find a conservatory that was 130 degrees and 95% humidity, be 95 degrees outside, you walk in there, it'll be 80, 85 degrees inside the conservatory. It's comfortable again. And that's because we took steps to make sure that we maintained it and sustained that investment over time. That's something that is core to everything we're doing in this new master development plan. We want to make sure that with every new building, there's a backup of endowment or operational funds to make sure we sustain it. It's also about taking practical lessons about the green side of things these days. Very hot, everybody's talking about it. All across the political spectrum today, people are trying to find out what their piece of that pie is. I can tell you it's pretty simple for us. It's all about plants here. Plants are made out of carbon. They get it from the air. And if you really want to do something about cleaning up the air, plant a tree. It's the simplest thing you could possibly do. I think it's interesting that a lot of people look at a plant, a tree, something growing wildly in their yard, and they wonder, where does all that stuff come from? It comes from up here, not down there. It gets some nutrition out of the ground, but it gets the carbon out of the air. That's why we're all carbon-based life forms, because that whole food chain starts with plants. The more we can connect with people at that whole sensibility about how the natural world works, the more we can have a broader sense of what sustainability is. The second thing is relevance. Again, I mentioned before, everybody finds what they want to find at a place like this. For a lot of people, they looked at the gardens and said, I don't know how it can be relevant to me. We have some people that only come for the concerts, other people that only come during the plant sale, or they only come for the holiday sale, or they have some connection to the Japanese garden. And so what we're emphasizing in all of our programming is making it relevant to a broad number of people. We've had an edgy and bold exhibit all this summer that has been remarkably successful by the bar that we set early on. We've had an exhibit called Urban Nature. Urban Nature is about linking together our perceptions of the urban world with the realities of the natural world. So we went out nationwide and found artists who were renowned streetscape artists. We brought them in and we had them paint on large murals their impression of the phrase urban nature, how those two things come together. Now, for a lot of our regulars, this was pretty jarring to see street-style art, some of it absolutely exquisite, other pieces absolutely challenging. But in their gardens, to see that was very difficult. And we did it to bring in a whole new audience, and it has succeeded. We have seen people here more diverse than we've ever seen before, and we've seen people here in their late teens and 20s coming here when their second grade teacher didn't tell them they had to, and coming here freely in order to connect with the gardens. We've had a big dance extravaganza about 2 weeks ago with Cleo Parker Robinson. We've even done a hip-hop poetry slam. Now, my guess is that very few people in this room have been to a poetry slam. And I have sworn that no trustees are allowed at our poetry slam. But the crowd that comes here, when they come in for the poetry, they walk out and see the gardens, and they fall in love with the place. It's how we're making a new connection and creating relevance for them. We have to create relevance for a lot of different people who want to see a lot of different things. The third area is diversity, and that's really a fun one for us because it's not only appealing to diverse crowds, it's talking about why diversity strengthens life on Earth in general, why it strengthens humanity. And we can tell that story through the eyes or the leaves of plants. We can talk about the fact, for example, and I don't know if you all know this or not, but there's quite an interesting revival of historic plants, or what are called heirloom plants. Heirloom vegetables are all the rage, and I don't know if you've been hearing about that or not. But the test is when you find somebody who's eaten an heirloom tomato. A tomato before it was hybridized into submission is a whole different experience than what I'm used to or what you're used to. It turns out that a couple hundred years ago, the French, for example, decided that carrots needed to be a certain size and orange. But there are all kinds of different carrots. And when you start branching out into those heirloom, those old varieties that people haven't grown forever, it's really quite an amazing experience. And it turns out that if you have 3,000 kinds of potatoes instead of only 2 kinds of potatoes, if a disease or a plague or something comes along that affects one, you don't lose everything. You can actually find all kinds of elements of those other potatoes that are stronger and better and bolder, and you can overcome obstacles. You see suddenly that diversity actually helps all of life. And that's a great story for us to be able to tell here at the Gardens. The fourth area is transformation. If you come here and you leave and you feel exactly the way you did when you walked in, we haven't done our job. If you come here and you find a plant that you want to put in your yard because you think it looks nice, we've done our job. If you come here after a very tough day downtown dealing with protesters and all the like, and you come here and feel better and refreshed when you go home, we've done our job. We have to make sure that people that come through our gates and then leave our gates go with something more than they came with. And if we do that, we really can get all those other key elements that make up who we are. Let me highlight for you real quick how we're translating that into stuff, the buildings. How do we transform this place so we honor the past, the incredible architecture that was built into our very structure, and how we take that forward so it meets all those specific goals. And I've got 3 minutes to do it. Phase 1. City of Denver just passed a bond for us of $18.6 million. It didn't look very big compared to a lot of the other culturals, but I tell people all the time, $18.6 million beats our last record by $18.4 million. So we love it. This is a big deal for us. We received bond funding in 1979 for $200,000 last time we did. So 18.6 is something we can really invest into what is really city property. Everything but 2 parcels, including the Waring Mansion, is owned by the city but managed by our nonprofit, which is Denver Botanic Gardens. We're going to take that 18.6 and build a new infrastructure track all around the gardens with water, non-potable water, fiber optic, telephone, and electrical. Also sewer lines that will go back and forth, but they're going to make sense now. They're not going to be 6 feet underground and made out of clay and asbestos, which is our current piping system. We're going to build a brand new greenhouse complex to the west of the conservatory. It's going to be available for you. You can walk in it, look at stuff, see a brand new working house, a major new exhibit house. It will extend the 4-season interest of the gardens. In phase 2, we're building a new parking structure. We should be underway